That's exactly what I was checking there. Thank you for replying on the no sound. I was trying some settings here on OBS so that the sound would automatically turn on depending on which camera I had, and that was not obviously working. So let me start over again. Howdy Mike and Zach. I think Mike, you've been on a couple of my streams. I recognize your name. And I think maybe Zach also. So, wanted to get into some of the things. First of all, thank you, Mike, talking about the holster. If you ordered on the first day, you should be getting your holster pretty much already have your holster, depending on where you're located or how fast your post office is. One thing that people run into is there's a little bit of wear in that you need, especially for the 711L holder, where you just basically with use that'll get a little bit. I'll actually show that here on camera. So this is my prototype holster, and I can undock the 711L holder, but it is tight. I did deliberately make it tight, and you can see where the white here, where it's kind of wearing, and part of that is due to the little kind of, there's a spring clip, and I got my much better camera here so we can zoom in. Come on, focus. All right, manual focus then. There we go. So this little spring clip, and that spring clip is what holds your flat bits. It's actually little grips inside here. So in either case, some folks have had it where basically depending on where that spring clip's oriented when you dock, it can either be really tight. So here it's just fine. I'll zoom back out here. So I'm able to pull the bit out. If you do get your bit all the way in and you can't get it out, take your tool, pop out a bit, go in like that with your thumb, and then you should be able to pull it out without, having the bit disappear on you, fling it across the room or something. So it takes a little bit of wear in. You can also optionally go back and actually file that little spot. If you want to re-dye that spot, you can use a kind of a Sharpie or something like that. So that's just something to be aware of. Otherwise, hopefully your holster fits perfectly. I have had some reports, at least, or just one report of the horizontal carry holster, and I'll show if I can dig one up here. This is a little bit older prototype of it. The horizontal carry holster, I've had some folks report that theirs felt looser, and like I had a customer who ordered 3 holsters, and for some reason they all have the exact same geometry in regards to the arc, but for some reason his was a little bit looser, and you can tighten these up by wrapping rubber bands basically around the plastic, putting it into boiling water. That will soften it and shrink it at the same time. In his case, he actually says that he just ended up doing it by hand with some oven mitts afterwards, and he got an absolute perfect fit after that. So if you do run into those issues with your holster, you can do that here. Let's see here. I just noticed that it's turning my camera off here. One second. Let me make sure that when I'm on this view, you kind of still see me talking. And we'll just shrink me down here. So the other thing that I wanted to show off today is the Scalpel holder. So I actually had these prototypes. This is the version without, or the not thinner version, and then here's the thinner version. So the difference between these two is that the older version of the Scalpel holder that I had for the Free P4 is physically thicker. If I can get this oriented nicely for the camera. And then it had also this kind of integrated washer bit. I decided to take the integrated washer out. That makes it easier if you need to make any adjustments. But otherwise, the only thing that I had to do to get this guy working, which is pretty much true of any of the Scalpel holders. And 1 second, let me grab a Free P2. By the way, this is how you safely remove scalpels. Don't try to do it with your fingers. You're supposed to do it with a pair of pliers. To get a perfect fit, and I'll zoom in on this slot here, you basically do need to do some grinding. And for that, where did I put it? Sorry, one second. I had it. I brought it back out from the garage. So you need to use a Leatherman grinding wheel. And I must have misplaced where I put that grinding wheel. I'm sorry. I think I might have put it on a shelf somewhere. But I have details on the product page regarding basically grinding that slot smoother than it comes by default. The reason why is that they really can't get in there and polish inside that slot. So using a Dremel grinding wheel, which you can even do by hand, you don't have to have a Dremel to do it. Cleans that up. Once that's cleaned up, installing a Scalpel. The camera will focus. It's just a matter of just snapping it back in like that. So it'll fit. It'll have a little bit of back and forth movement that's required in order to get it to fit around the end of this, but it really doesn't affect the use because usually you're either pulling, you're not necessarily cutting back and forth with the scalpel holder. And then this is the blade that I recommend, the Havlon 70A blade. It does not have the sharpened end. And the reason for that, and I'll show it on my free P4 here, let me actually swap blades. Actually, I have some blades over here. These are some of my used blades, but they'll work for the demonstration. This one's been used for tape and a lot of stuff. It's got a bunch of sticky goo on it, but that's all right. So we'll dock this. This is on the older free P4 version. And this is something I can't work around in that the free series actually has a little bit of movement. And it's true of even the blade. So I take, like, basically the blades can pop out a little bit. And it's designed such that it makes it easier to get your inertia in order to deploy them. In either case, what it means is that the scalpel holder can pop up on you sometimes like that, and so you don't want that sharp tip poking into you. So again, the only blades I'm recommending is the 70A blade. So in either case, the scalpel holder, I had it installed on my Arc earlier. I took it, the thinner version, I had it installed earlier today. It works perfectly fine. And there's basically, I did drill out this to a 1/8 inch just to ream it out, but you can even see it here that there's no, it barely kind of just shaved it out. It didn't really require it, so the calibration on that's been pretty good. The reason it's not in my Arc, I now have two of them by the way, basically mine that I'm going to everyday carry, and this is going to be my experimental bed platform, is that I currently have the T-shank adapter, the new version of the T-shank adapter installed instead of the scalpel holder. So the new T-shank adapter did work. I did tweak the 3D model, and I'll show that in a minute here. What I did is closed up this little cutout here in order to remove, there's the weak point, which is that there's a flat across here, and I discussed this when we actually did this design live. And then the other difference is that you're going to need even shorter screws. So come on camera, focus. So these screws right now are actually hitting when it closes, and so it does close okay. It kind of moves out of the way, but that makes the whole thing tilt up a little bit. So the T-shank adapter, I'm going to do a couple more tweaks, but I still think that the geometry of it is all good enough that once I make those tweaks, I can have both the scalpel holder and the T-shank adapter ready to order this weekend. And then the comb is the other fun little accessory. So again, this is nylon 11, very, very flexible plastic. And so that works really well as a comb. It's a little silly, fun accessory, but it does work. For those folks who decide that they don't really need either the saw or the serrated blade, is where that comb will install. And then the other thing that I wanted to get into today is the Barnacle bit holder. So this has been a more popular accessory than I expected. To me, it's kind of a silly little accessory, but I know there's plenty of people who have bought it along with the holsters. A couple updates. That I've had several people ask if it can hold the mutt bits. So this is the longer bit for that I think is for the Leatherman mutt, or is it Leatherman ST300? I forget. But yes, it can fit. You can either kind of center mount it like that. Of course, you have the potential to get snagged on things. Or you can kind of mount it to where the detents stop, like that. It does mean that you can't get in there and deploy your scissors nearly as easy. But it will hold them. I've had some people ask if I can make a longer version, but it isn't really needed. So the next thing I wanted to get into was several requests to design the Barnacle bit holder so that it could hold some of the Victorinox card accessories. Specifically the tweezers, which are of course missing from the Leatherman free series. And then either the pen, which is absolutely tiny little pen, or maybe the toothpick. And the funny part is I have detailed 3D models of the entire Victorinox card. And I made them, and I'll excuse the noise here. And I haven't released this yet because I've still been working on prototypes of it. It's just been on the back burner. What it is replacing the free T2 plastic shell. So the default plastic shell is this injection molded piece of plastic with a whole bunch of internal wasted space. So the idea was to make a free T2 3D printed shell that you could then take the file on the Victorinox. You can see it's a really tight fit. That's one of the things I'm working on. Let's see, is that the pen slot? That's one of the issues, is trying to get it. No, this is the pen slot. So you could have the pen. I think that's the tweezers. Nope, this is the tweezers. And the toothpick. See, that's part of the reason I'm still prototyping. That's too tight of a fit up there. So, in either case, the reality is that the free T2 and T4 are not nearly as popular as the other accessories. So I just haven't really put any time into updating this design and tweaking it over and over like I do with the ARC. But we can take these parts and maybe design a Barnacle bit holder that can hold a few of the accessories. So that's what we're going to do live here. Let me clean up a little bit here so I don't end up poking myself with a scalpel blade. Alright. Howdy F-Wheels. Alright, so we're going to end up designing something completely new, but it's still going to use some of the geometry from the Barnacle bit holder. So what I'm going to do is simply copy this up, hide the native Barnacle bit holder, copy this back down, and we'll make this with a new replacement part. And we'll put this under the ARC since that's the primary thing that people will be using it for. And how do you spell Victorinox? Put it under that. Barnacle. I always misspell this. Victorinox. Holder. And the reason to do, by the way, the Victorinox card is that this is much more easy to get, and you get all the accessories. I actually do have the standard Leatherman accessories. Where do I have it? I've misplaced an entire bag of stuff. But I already do have the accessories that come in the Leatherman. Why can you not save? Alright, might have to do this a different way. Got a little bit of a bug going on. Let me fix that. The standard Leatherman tweezers and stuff that you can buy are, you're actually going to pay more than a Victorinox card to get, and then you won't get the pen and the toothpick and things like that. So I've actually 3D modeled the Leatherman parts also, but I still don't think it's worth putting their replacement parts in. Alright, one second, let me get the copy of the file. What I'm doing is copying the Barnacle bit holder native file. If I can find it here. I don't think I'm in the right folder. One second. Anodyne, I think I recognize you from a previous chat also. Ordered, received the arc holster, open face, open clip. It doesn't begin to fit clip up, only clip down. Even though there's not as smooth as I'd hope. Any other reports? Clip up versus clip down. You're talking about the pocket clip? The pocket clip does need to be on the blade side of the tool with any of the holsters. The pocket clip needs to be on this side. You can't have the pocket clip on the back side. There's just simply no room. I've covered that in other live streams about why the pocket clip has to be on the blade side of the tool. And then of course it only docks one way, so you can't dock it with the blade on the other side. The blade needs to go on this side here. Alright. Why am I not finding my Barnacle bit holder? There it is. Okay. Oh, that's why I couldn't find the file. I saved it when I was doing the garage number 5 and made it after that fact. So Victorinox. And arc. Alright, we'll drag this back in, reassociate it. There we go. And let me minimize my folder so I can make sure that I'm seeing what you guys are seeing. Yeah, I'm sorry that it isn't as clear on the website that I did. It is printed there, but there's a lot of information on the website there, and it's easy to miss. So now I need to find the Victorinox card and bring those parts in. And let's see, where did I save that off to? And I'll show a little bit of this in the view here in a second. So this is how I create my 3D models. I've shown this on a few views before, or a few live streams before. But I take a picture of each object with a ruler next to it. And I do this with the camera zoomed in as much as possible from as far away as possible to remove as much parallax effect. And so basically each of these implements, and then I back that up with caliper measurements as far as getting thickness and things like that. It's very interesting. Victorinox has put actually a lot of engineering into this, where this toothpick, like this little detent, built-in detent little bump right here, and also the fact that it's kind of bent. It's really subtle, but it actually tapers wider at the top here, and that makes it so it has that. Just again, what they're doing is tweaking to get that absolute perfect friction fit when you dock your parts back into the card. I'm going to move this to this side. So I think the number one thing that people want is tweezers, and then maybe number 2 is the pen. I'm going to be plenty of people who want the toothpick, but that plastic toothpick kind of deteriorates really fast. I've found that you're just better off trying to find a toothpick at a restaurant and stockpiling those. The toothpick will usually fit into where the tweezers fit anyways. Alright, so we'll bring in the tweezers, and we'll just, right now, ignoring the bit, let me save this view, or actually let me bring in the pen next. And of course the pen's much longer. So they might have issues with getting that to fit. We'll find that out. And we'll drag that down to be somewhere in line. So we've got to obviously work around the bit holder, but what we'll do is first of all go in and remove everything from the bit holder that we don't need, and then see what we can work around with. It's opening the file right now. Come on, it's taking a minute. It's taking more than a minute. What's going on here? There we go. So one, on the Barnacle bit holder, I included 2 sets of screw holes, just simply if you overdrove those countersunk screws and blew out the bottom. On this one, I don't think we're going to do that because I think we're going to end up with a completely different shape in the end. So all I want to do is cut away everything that isn't the screw holes that exist now. And then we'll add back in geometry to hold whatever Victorinox accessories we decide we want to hold. So just literally delete all that. Delete that little bit there. And I want to have at least some geometry on both sides of the screw hole. So basically that needs to stay, and then we can design everything else around that. So we could either make this really slim, potentially, or we can make it hold 3 accessories. Maybe we make it hold the toothpick. That would be the most logical thing that folks would want to carry. You don't really need the file. You have a file and you don't need the scissors. Where did I save the toothpick? There it is. Alright. Got 32 folks on stream. Make sure and say hi when you drop in, and I can ask any other questions. Feel free to interrupt me with any questions on the holsters and things. Alright, so to get the pen out, you obviously need to be able to slide it free. Here's something we might be able to do that's kind of cool. If we flip the pen around, because it's so long, we could maybe make it so that this spring tab retains the pen. Howdy, Andrew. Aladine, alright. At any rate, your holster's like butter now. I'm glad to hear that. The nylon material, by the way, like, it will wear in as far as things moving. So like your ratchet driver might be kind of tough at first, but it will wear in, and it also, because of the way the plastic, you're going to go to the limit of the plastic movement of the part. So here's my very old Free P4 holster that I wore for years, and you can still hear and see that the clicking still works perfectly fine. So that little detent should last you for years and years. It shouldn't wear away, I guess is what I mean. This might be a little bit tricky with the pen, but I think we can get to something that would work really well. Now we could end up using the scales as the backstop and make something that grabbed everything from the top side, but then that means the potential of people scratching their arc, and nobody wants to do that. So we may end up still having to have some plastic underneath, which means it's going to be a little bit thicker, at least 1 millimeter of plastic. I think the tweezers need to be in the middle because they're going to require a little bit more thickness. But I don't want to get it so long. Main being that the tweezers go up and over the screws, and then the toothpick's going to be at the outside edge. So it looks like all these end up maybe being better oriented where you pull them away from the screw, because otherwise this screw is going to get in the way of basically everything. Where in this regard you should be able to grab this, pull it all the way out, and it should have enough flexibility to clear. And it doesn't matter too much if the pen moves back and forth, so let's go ahead and get the pen. And it'd be nice if the pen had a cap, so that it didn't dry out as fast. So this is just orienting the parts, and what I'm going to do to make this a little bit faster in CAD is I'm only going to show all the components that we actually need to do this design and hide everything else. And probably don't actually need the plier head. That way the CAD will run faster. Everyone misspelled Victorinox over and over today. Victorinox. And I'm also going to mispronounce it, but I'm bad at that in the first place. Alright. Yeah, Leatherman is still out of stock on the ratchet driver, boo. I really wish they would get that back in stock. I did order, let me pull it out here. So I actually ordered, I'll show this. When I ordered my second ARC, I ordered a whole big box of Leatherman parts. Part of it was I got a free pouch and I got the free sheath. For those who are curious, granted this is, you know, a little bit of competition. Here's the Leatherman Insider sheath. It's leather and it fits the ARC perfectly. This is the sheath that should have come with the ARC and not this oversized Leatherman Surge sheath. So if you do join the Insider program, and I ordered something, it was also my birthday month, and so I got that sheath for along with that. So if you're interested in that, that's there. The other thing I did order is the black bit extender. Now this black bit extender comes free with plenty of leftover black oxide on it, and it will come off on your fingers like crazy. I just wanted to validate. There's a couple things that I've had some customers tell me, and that is that where is my current bit driver? I think it's stuck. There it is. Somebody pointed out to me that the new bit drivers have a little bit more body down here. He said it was a different diameter, but let's double check that. .4325, .4324. Yeah, so it is 0.02 bigger in diameter. So if you happen to order a new bit extender and not the ratchet driver, what they changed was, I think they put a bigger magnet in here, or just more body to hold that magnet. However, it does fit. It's a little bit tighter fit right now, so I've had issues pulling this out. Part of this might be that my holster is still kind of wearing in, so if you have issues with that, grab your pliers and then pull. So you see it's a little bit tighter fit. Come on. This is not a good demonstration, is it? I have to do this against my chest here. So one issue you might be able to do is if you end up having this newer guy, is you might need to get in and maybe you could sand these a little, the detents to be a little bit looser. The other option you could do is push your bit through a couple times until that wears in. As far as I could tell, they haven't changed the ratchet driver because they simply aren't making them, or I don't know what their delay is in getting getting those out. Alright, let's see what the other accessories that I got, just in case you're curious. So this is the, I did decide to buy the black cutters. If you decide to buy the black cutters that are for the wave and stuff, unfortunately, if you buy those from Leatherman right now, they're still the version that's rounded off. So I might end up going ahead and just returning those as a way to say, hey guys, fix your cutter heads. And then the other one that I bought just to confirm design, even though I already had an older version that came on the free P4, is the lanyard loop. And they actually have changed the lanyard loop versus the free P4, and maybe just to fit a bigger rope. The only real difference is that this entire loop is bigger. There's all my free grease that I got off that black one. So they did change that a little bit. Why Leatherman changes things mid-production without, you know, any kind of notification? Well, it's their prerogative to do, but still kind of causes annoyances here. Alright, let's get back to designing this. Yes, eBay sellers will jump all over them when they come back. That's an unfortunate reality these days. It is make it so that it's harder for everybody else to get them. Now I did order a. I have two ratchet drivers because I did order a spare a long time ago, and I'm kind of glad I did. It's in my garage. All right, let's do a couple things here. I need to activate this part so I can pull data off of it. Then we'll go back in and start editing this guy. So we want to have at least 1 millimeter of plastic on the bottom side, and maybe try to get this within the profile of the scales so that this just looks better when it's attached to the arc. Oops, missed grab that line. Well, it's not grabbing the right line. Let's go off of here then. That's fine. And maybe we go ahead and go right to where the pocket clip or the finger opening is for the scissors. Or maybe we go offset maybe 1 millimeter from there just because of potential alignment issues. So we'll go offset from there. Something like this. And then this might become where the pin lives. And we'll figure out what the other end of that pen is going to look like later. Let's grab all of this and bring it up at least 1 millimeter. Maybe could get to 1.2 since it's going to be only attached at one end of the part. I want a little bit of strength, but the geometry we add later is going to also add more strength to the part. But just to give it a base. Actually, I think we can get away with 1 millimeter because of the other geometry we're going to add later. I can always tweak it. That's one of the nice things about this. So now that we have that down, what we're going to do is grab all of these parts and associate them so that they're basically flush. Now the tweezers, of course, expand, and we'll have to work on that. And this is something that, again, prototypes will be required. But we'll make it so that these guys all sit right against the surface. And we'll have a little bit of tolerance and some friction spots that we'll put in a little bit later. All right, let's grab the pen and actually I want the left edge of the pen. Come on, give me that point. There we go. And I want that at least 1 millimeter in. It's going to be a little bit tight around the screws, but we can work around that. toothpick is a little bit more complicated. Like I said, it's got little subtle, that little detent feature, and then the fact that it sweeps up when it exits. I think I got an idea how we can work with that detent feature. I want this part to be as small and light as possible. All right, so he's modeled with the draft, the plastic draft, so it's a little bit harder to grab that edge. But we'll bring him in. Yeah, we'll have to see how we're going to work around these screws later. So let's grab the toothpick, and it's going to go up and over the screws when it docks. So we'll just bring him in to be just flush with the right edge. Toothpick's a little bit of an issue. It's going to be poking out over here, which is not ideal. Is the toothpick actually longer than the tweezers? Nope. Either that or I make this wider than the scale cutout, which is probably what I'm going to have to do in order to make this actually work. So let's grab this edge here, pull it in maybe 1/2 millimeter. Doesn't give us much, but every little tiny bit counts. No room for the pin. So that pin is not in the Victorinox Swiss card. I don't. Oh no, it is. I'm sorry. The literal teensy tiny pin. Well, we might have to 3D model that live here. I forgot about the pin. Thank you for reminding me. Let me. Did I actually miss that when I did the 3D model? I did. All right, we might 3D model that live. The pin, it might be a last second little add-on, just because it's tiny, but that is definitely worth having on there. I probably completely missed it as even a feature. Thank you, Zach. A second, let me grab I need the midpoint of this line, and it's not giving it to me right now. And I know in the CAD here, it's a little bit harder for you guys to see the lines in the CAD that I'm drawing. Actually, you know what I can do? Let's do this. I can turn up. It's normally annoying to me when I boost the line size, but I'll go ahead and boost the line size for now. And we will grab a tangent arc that comes off here, comes down to here. So there, now you can probably see a little bit more of at least that one line. And close this other side up. Oh, I drew that tangent arc to the wrong thing. I still want to be 1/2 millimeter in from the side of the arc. I don't want to be literally on the side of the arc. There we go. So we'll add this geometry in. 1.2 millimeters, or that's right, we said 1. So that gives us a little more room on that side. And then now if we basically just continue this circle around to the other side, close that off, go tangent, come on. There we go. And we'll just go ahead and trim this corner, and we'll add that geometry on that side. Alright, I don't need the rest of this to show up here. Happy to help make more for you. Whoops, what happened over here? Oh, I missed the little cutout there. Alright, so let's clean up. We don't need all the sketches. And I don't need the dimensions. Now we'll kind of reposition our parts. So I think that'll still look good once it's mounted. And we could even add a little bit of thickness where we close off this space around that scale. That's a possibility. All right. Which means we can move this up by 1/2 millimeter and this down by 1/2 millimeter, because that's how much we gave ourselves, and it's still the toothpick sticking out. I don't like that. I guess I can make it so it barely touches where the scissors are, and we can do the same thing here. In fact, that might be needed just to pull those parts, make it easier to pull those parts out. And we'll pull the pen back a little bit so we have some space on the left side for it to actually have a cap. Howdy Knife Train 311, I think I've seen you on chat before. Not too late to the party. I did show some stuff for the scalpel holder and things like that. Those will be ready. The scalpel holder, T-shank, and comb should be available this weekend. I just got to actually make the product pages and some renderings and things like that. I'm gonna, because it also affects the P4 in the garage, I got to do a bunch of double checking in CAD to make sure that that all works together. All right, let's see what we can do. The pen is the easiest thing to hold. It's just going to be a cylinder, so let's start with that. We'll literally grab the pen, and we're going to add 0.1 millimeter tolerance. Still want it to be a fairly snug fit. The bottom edge is going to be flat there, but that's fine. We want basically it to be tighter against there anyways, and I want at least a 1 millimeter wall. Actually, what we can do is a wall that is tangent to here, starting here. Oops, I want from the center point of that, not going to some other geometry in the background. There we go. So how much thickness does that give us? 1.1 millimeters. That should be enough for these little tiny parts, and these aren't very big components. They're not heavy or anything like that. Wait, what's going on here? 1 second. Why does that suddenly look higher than the other side? Oh. Okay, 1 minute. This face tangent to there. What geometry am I seeing here? Is this angled? Oh, that must have gotten accidentally angled. Maybe I didn't draw that line perfectly straight. It usually snaps to a perfect straight. Nope, did not snap to a perfect straight. In fact, I think it just didn't do it again. But I can constrain it to be perfectly straight. There we go. Then we'll adjust these other face. Well, actually, we might tweak that. I'll have to think about how we're going to tweak that. Sorry, thinking while staring at CAD. Happens a lot when you're actually working in CAD. We're just going to go ahead and close this down. I'll worry about those other faces later. And worry about cleaning up the ends of this. Right now I just want, what does this kind of tube look like? Like, where is it going to hit the screws and things like that? We'll just go ahead and pull it all the way across and cut away this section. Which actually I could maybe just do by just doing that. Nope. Didn't want to delete that straight off. Oh, is it because this isn't tangent? Why? That should be coplanar. There shouldn't be a second face here. There we go. Now it might. Go ahead and delete that. Of course not. Why is it pulling in? It's being a little bit weird right now, so we'll cut out that, that, And I got to close off the corner. And saying this isn't a closed shape. There we go. And we're probably going to close off the end of this, but we're going to leave a little hole at the end. So that might be an issue where we can't necessarily make it so it's completely closed off. It's possible to 3D print it that way, but then cleaning the powder out of this long hole, you're almost guaranteed you're going to get powder stuck in that hole. There's a couple things I can do to mitigate that, and we'll work on that a little bit. Right now I just want to see if I can get everything to fit with plastic around it in such a way that it holds the parts. Pull this back so that the pen stops at a certain spot. So we'll go right here. So even if that ends up being a little bit loose, the pen won't go anywhere because it'll hit the spring tab. But that actually might be a good thing. The pen is going to be the heaviest accessory on here. And then here what I can do is pull this to meet this edge. And probably don't need this geometry at all. And then the last thing, just to make sure that I don't forget about it, the Victorinox card itself, this is going to be, zoom in real close. Come on, you can focus a little further there. There we go. So all they do is rely on a little fingernail kind of grab action. So the card itself is basically flat here, and then each of the implements has a little bit of an angle on it. I'm not sure if I want to leave that or if I want to provide a little bit more of a grip. And so what I was thinking of doing was just simply duplicating that angle like this, so that you'd have kind of twice the nail grip. So how much plastic does Victorinox have under the pen? Yeah, about what I got there. Okay, that isn't... I'm going to debate whether to integrate that, extend the bottom so it meets the edge of the pen, or leave that floating like that. I'll play with that a little bit later. Let's go ahead and see what we can do with the toothpick next. Because the tweezers, well, like I said, tweezers are more important than the toothpicks. Maybe we do the tweezers next. And just because it's bothering me, we're going to round this bottom edge here, just so it matches the scale. Something like that. So for the tweezers, what I think we're going to do is, obviously we want to have enough thickness. I'm going to switch again to the close-up camera. Zoom. Alright, we're going to have to go manual focus. Second here. Focus, come on. Oh, and maybe I'm zoomed in too much. Very narrow depth of field here. Getting the... Oh, that's what was happening. The camera's doing the super zoom while I'm focusing. Getting it so that this was perfectly flat with those countersunk screws is a little bit tricky. Now this is the Leatherman's countersunk screws. If you do it to some other off-the-shelf countersunk screws, you might end up with something a little bit different and have to maybe tighten them down in order to get that perfectly flat. But I need to make sure that, especially if we're going to have the tweezers come through that section, obviously you don't want them to get hung up on those screws. The other thing is that I'm just realizing is that I was thinking we would do a like a ramp, something like this that's almost at like a 70 or 80 degree angle. So when you dock the tweezers, it would run up that ramp. The catch with that is that potentially layer lines or the fact that the end of the tweezers are sharp means that this will probably just get ripped away. So what we're actually going to end up doing is just, and I'll tweak this for the tweezers as I need, we'll just cut away, we'll just make this the thickness. So this whole thing's going to end up being probably the thickness that it's showing where the pen is what the entire part's going to end up being. Just to clear those screw heads. But we might have, that might provide us a little bit of space for the pen. Might be something else we can do, but I think the tweezers are going to end up having to go into a rectangular slot instead of a ramp kind of slot. They're just going to have to go, which is exactly how they dock in the Victorinox anyways. It's just a rectangular cutout. Because it's see-through, I can actually kind of see how they did that. So in that case, we will pull in, well, first of all, let's clean up these a little bit. And it's no big deal if I have to cut away a spot for the screws. There's a little tiny bit cut out here. It won't affect the strength in that area. Alright, so what we'll do, come up with a rectangle. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky. I can't measure this rectangular slot on the Victorinox. I don't think I can get in there and measure it with calipers. Let's see if we can. Yeah, there's no way I can get the calipers in there to measure how big that needs to be, so we're just going to have to work with the CAD model. Howdy, J-Ro. Alright, so we're going to do a rectangle, maybe 3.2, so it's a little bit wider. And this is going to require some experimentation. How thick do I make that? Let's just start rendering it at 1 and we can adjust it as we need, along with at least 1 millimeter material around it. And let me pull that sketch in. Come on, give me the sketch. And I don't think that goes into the card area. Yeah, this is going to be tricky to 3D print because it's going to have such intricate, tiny details on the inside. I've done prints like that before. And there's some things I can do, such as adding holes to the backside, so that when they bead blast this, you guarantee that those areas get clear. I know I'm covering up the screws, but we'll clean that up in a minute. I'll pull this out. Clean up that face. Now let's see if we take him and let's look at a cutaway view. This is the fastest way to figure out if we think that's going to fit. So one that's got a little detent kind of bump at the beginning we need to account for. And the metal flattens out to, I know I have it there in CAD, but I can measure this in reality, 0.084 millimeters. So it definitely will fit in a 1 millimeter cutout. And then the spring's going to retain that part. So let's do this. just to make this look better, we'll make the top thicker tangent with our little cutout there. And we'll maybe give us another 0.1 millimeters, or even like 0.15 of thickness, and that's for that. And then I need to, and this is the simplest way to do it, is just to subtract that so I know what little bit of thickness I'm interfering with. So the simplest way to do this is going to be to provide a little bit of a ramp, which is actually going to be needed to dock the tweezers, so the tweezers get compressed as you push your part in. Did I draw that on the wrong face? I did. Okay, over here. So we're just going to cut this away. Let's delete that subtraction. I just wanted to know where it was. So this will have to come in maybe 6 millimeters. And then it's going to need to be tapered at some point. That might be too deep, we'll find out. So we'll turn on that. Yeah, doesn't need to go that far. Actually, it doesn't even need to be that thick. Question is whether we just leave that tolerance over there and just let the toothpick being compressed do the rest, which I think is what we're going to do. So that way there's a little bit more of a run-in and ramp. So when you're docking the tweezers, it's not like you're getting caught up. Of course, it's easy enough to compress the tweezers with your fingers when you dock it, so prototypes will determine whether or not that's all needed. Okay, I don't need all this geometry. Next is the toothpick. And we could make the toothpick and tweezers share a little bit. If we don't have to, I'd rather not. So let's grab, I think we have him set up to be 1 millimeter away from this side. Let me just set it up to, it's not perfectly straight. That's why it's not going to let me do that. I mean, right now the tweezers fit, but they're going to fit with 0 tolerance. So either got to decide, or not the tweezers, sorry, the toothpick. Either I'm going to need to pull in this face a little bit, but that means we got less thickness around the pen, and to me the pen needs to be the thickest because it's overhanging the furthest. Alright, well, while I'm thinking about that, we'll go ahead and add these cutouts for the screws to get in there. And we'll clean these up as far as make them look better later. Right now I just want to make sure I'm accounting for the screws in that regard. So I can either make the toothpick cutout just another rectangular cutout, but the fact that the toothpick tapers upward, it kind of I think they rely on the so I'm gonna play with this here. I shouldn't just play with this myself. You guys should see it. So when you dock the toothpick, it's really loose, and then there is the detent, and then it starts getting tighter, and then it gets tighter and tighter and tighter based on that little ramp up that they have, such that obviously you don't want it loose and falling out. So I could just do a rectangular cutout and ignore that angle, because that's actually what's kind of bending when it's docked. So I think we'll do that. In which case, we just need to cut out a hair bigger than the toothpick. Which unfortunately we're kind of running out of space. But we can tweak that in a minute here. So actually what I can do is pull this face down and then cut out this face. And we're going to delete him for now. Oh, I guess not. Let's pull him in to where the apex of that. Nope, come on. 1 second. Trying to get the CAD to be nice. That little round didn't work out exactly into the same spot, so I want this to, of course, not have a little tiny ledge. I think we can pull this in safely to 0.5 millimeter. Actually, here's something I can try. Is the toothpick slot interchangeable with the tweezer slot? And the answer is yes. Fills the same docking in either one, so I just need 2 identical slots, and then you can decide which one you want to put in there. So in that case, we'll grab ourselves a little bit 1 millimeter over here, and because this slot has the ramp, I want to copy all of this geometry for the cutout, and it can go off to infinity over here. And how wide did we make this? I won't worry about minimum thickness at this point, but 3.2, that I can measure with calipers. So their slot, how about that? Pretty darn close to 3.2. If I push the plastic, I'm sure I could tweak it to 3.2. Let's double check against the tweezers. So there may be 3.15. We can do 3.15. That'll work out. So let's go 3.15 over here. It's really a tiny difference. And then I'm going to grab this cutout, or this shape. We'll cut him 3.15, and then we're left with this little middle bridge, and if that middle bridge is bigger than 0.9, it's 0.073. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shapeways here, and go to their materials. They're nylon 12, which is what I make pretty much everything out of as far as plastic. It's the most versatile material. And we can go down to 0.7 minimum supported wall thickness. So we can still make this part with a teeny tiny 0.73 thick wall there. And the fact that it's an interior wall and separate and connected on multiple sides, it won't lose any real strength there. Okay, so we have 2 cutouts that go all the way through. You can dock either the toothpick or the tweezers. Let's go ahead and adjust these to the point where they'll be docked. Of course, they have different heights of cutouts here. Let's look at this guy compared to that guy. So he'll dock right there. And our cutout's big enough that that will fit. Oh, by the way, there's also this other, in the toothpick there's actually 2 detents. There's a detent on the side, this little bump on the side, and there's a little bump up. Very subtle. You can barely see it on the real part. And then this guy will push in. Oops, I hit the wrong part. So he's docked all the way. Why are you... Oh, he's going left and right. Okay. So maybe we swap the toothpick and tweezers. Alright, I can do that. I want to get them nicely centered inside this so that they, as we move geometry, these will automatically move. And so I'm going to center the tweezers between this wall, and I'm going to have to find the other, there we go, that wall. So he's constrained. Because the toothpick's kind of a little oddball, we're just going to do it manually. Well, they both fit. Not getting in the way of the scissors too much. The pen fits. Probably move the pen even further to the left. How much further do we want to move this? Let's see, if I take, actually, why is the pen got such a flat? Oh, because we changed the thickness of the base and it moved to the coplanar plane with that. Didn't want to do that. I want the pen to have, actually could just have a full round. And then what I can do is this is something that's cool about 3D printing that I can do, is I can do an internal like detent using a small bump, or more likely with a pen I'm going to taper the very end such that it tightens down at the last second in order to retain the pen and also make it so that it's not loose inside there. Alright, let's figure out how far we want, starting on this plane. Will the pen get obstructed by the tool release? No, in fact I think that'll be a feature. The pen, you do have to move the tool release to get the pen out, but then it also means the pen won't be able to fall out. So we'll go about there. And we're going to close off the end of the pen such that it has a little bit of a cap. When I prototype, it might have issues with this getting clogged with powder, but I think I can do a couple things to mitigate that. So that's fully closed off now. And we'll go ahead and work on this in cutaway view so we can see what we're doing. And what we're going to do is take the last little bit of this, if I can get the sketch to lock onto that plane. Oh, wrong plane. Come on. Why do you give me planes that are, is it because I'm in cutaway view? Come on. There it is. There we go. I want that plane right there. Now I can go back to cutaway view. And we want this to kind of taper down to maybe 1 millimeter hole at the end. And so extrude this out. Doesn't matter how far. And then I'm going to draft the inside of that cylinder by maybe 15 degrees. Now that matches the angle at the end of the pen, so that's obviously not going to tighten down. So we want some interference at the very end here. So 5 and 6 are too much. Maybe 9 degrees there. That causes a little tiny conflict at the very end. So that will close off and seal, essentially, is the goal. I know I don't have these with, let me do this. Let's pretend you're going to buy this in orange, and then that way there's some contrasting colors here so you guys can see a little bit more of what's going on. although the cutaway doesn't show the contrasting color. So that'll tighten down at the very end, and what we could do, we still might need a hole at the very end so that this gets clear of powder. Otherwise, that's going to, what you end up with is caked powder at the end there, and no amount of automatic bead blasting is going to remove that. So if I do a tiny, maybe 1.2 millimeter hole, I know it means the ball's kind of exposed, but it's not like the Victorinox card's airtight. And then I'll have to add some holes on the back side so that they can depowder that long channel. Okay. That's interesting. The tweezers end up being almost perfectly the right length for this end cutout. What I need to do is I need to make sure that somebody can use third-party screws instead of the Leatherman arc screws. So if I show just this screw, the Leatherman arc screw has a smaller diameter head on it of only 0.142, I think I did it in millimeters, 3.6 millimeters. And then it's a number 256 screw, but this is not a common off-the-shelf screw. It's really customized. They put a bigger Torx head than you'd have normally on a screw this tiny. And then the countersink going straight into the threads is a little bit different. So if somebody picked a screw even slightly bigger than this, then this guy's not going to attach. So what we'll do is we'll hit McMaster. No thanks, what are we making? Late to the party. No thanks, what we're making is an accessory holder that can hold the Victorinox Swiss card accessories. The toothpick, the tweezers, the pen, and as somebody pointed out, I missed the pin. It's so small I can't even get it out of here. Little teeny tiny needle on there as an accessory to attach to the Leatherman arc. And so it'll be a little kind of a backpack that sticks on the side, gives you more utility for it. Probably won't be compatible with my holster now that I'm thinking about it, because we pushed all the way to the edge of the scale here. If I want to make it compatible with my holster, I'll have to look at that in a minute here. I guess the other option is to push all of this closer to the middle, but I kind of like that it's centered right on top of the scale, because with this curved edge, makes it look, well, it does make it look better. Alright, so we're going to hit McMaster. You guys can't read that unless I blow this up. So we're going to go screws, inch, 256, countersunk, and then they only need to be, I want to say they're only 1/8 inch long. One second, let me go to my own website and find out what I claimed as far as screws that are compatible with the Barnacle bit holder. In fact, I linked to the screws on McMaster by 1/8 inch long. Okay, so by 1/8 inch long, and you can get them in different materials. You could get them in brass if you wanted that little look. But we're going to go Torx Plus, meaning they're the same as what Leatherman has, in which case they only come in stainless steel. And let me see, I might have already downloaded the 3D model of this guy and put him in my project folder. Nope, I have not. So we'll download the 3D model and open that. Whoops, start S. Go to my downloads folder and grab that screw. Dan, how about for the pen cap, integrate a small cap in? Could also eliminate the pen from getting caught on things. Serves a dual purpose. You You mean like a thing that goes onto the actual part, or onto the pen as a cap? The reality is that this kind of needs to be one part. You can't make a part that small from Shapeways. We'll make this guy out of stainless steel. Let me optimize him. You can see how this has basically a wider head on it. What Torx does it use? It actually is a Torx T6. So I'm willing to bet that Leatherman used this screw, because if you're prototyping, Master's the source of all that kind of stuff. I'm going to put a comment that that's a T6 so I don't forget. And I might as well put that this is number 256. Come on. I gotta do this a different way. There we go. No thanks. Nice, but... No thanks is his name. Nice, but I don't want to buy another holster. Yeah, we'll see if I can make it compatible. We might do some tweaks. One second. One last thing I want to do is put the head of the screw... I am going to try to make this compatible with the holster. I already have 36 variants of the Leatherman Arc holster, and I need to make 36 more for maybe a left-handed version of this. So number 2-56 by 0.25 inches long, counter-sunk stainless steel screw, obviously. And I don't need all the rest of that. Well, Torx and then T6. That way this file name has some nice names. Let me put this into the Barnacle bit holder, which I apparently was keeping in the Garage 5 project folder. Actually, let's put this in the Victorinox one that we're working on now. So Arc, Victorinox, just so I have all the stuff in the right place. Change this file folder name. All right. So now what we can do is drag in larger headed screw. I'm going to isolate just those two parts. We'll constrain the axis, and this is something that a lot of people miss when they do countersunk screws. They align the head where they think it needs to go, when what you actually need to do, and I'll show this in a cutaway view, is you need to align the cones of the countersinks together. So I'm going to connect this cone to this cone, and it looks like, did I model that with a 90-degree cone? And I think when I measured Leatherman screw, it was 90 degrees, not 82. The default's 82, so I wonder if they customized that. We might need to double check that in a second here. I'm pretty sure I modeled this, I modeled this like almost under a microscope. But it's really hard to tell the difference between 82 and 90 degrees when a part is this tiny. But I'm curious if I modeled it at 90 or 82. Being inches, it should be 82, and I modeled it at 90. It's probably actually 82 considering it's a number 256 screw. So this is something where I might have to go ahead and double check against reality. This is going to be a little bit tricky to do. Like I said, it's an absolutely tiny screw. Let's see if we can do that. Might even be able to see it better on camera. Come on. Let's move it to the focus point. You know what? That's not 90. I can see on camera that it's not 90. Let's make the camera zoom in. Come on. Camera can see better than I can. Focus. That is not 90 degrees. I'm pretty sure. So it's probably 82. In fact, it's got a little more thread than I show in my CAD model. So let's change our CAD model to 82, our countersunk on the Barnacle bit holder to 82. It doesn't, interfere with the actual fitment because, like I said, it's such a tiny difference in scale. Glad I switched to the good camera instead of the iPhone, so I can do that kind of zoom in. Let's see if we can do this. I'm going to remove that round. Easy enough. Are you going to be nice and update this? Actually, you know what? That's not 90. Sorry, that was wider than 90. That might be 110. Alright, let's see here. Stainless steels would look good against the black of the rest of the tool. Yeah, knife train, I mean, all the screws are stainless steel anyways. So 110 is the other option, and we probably can't get it in a Torx. Can we get, or 100 degrees, not 110, 100 degrees. I need to look at that on camera again. I'm sorry. Now I swear that it's actually wider than 90. Let's do this. Let's put this screw, oh, it's not going to let me do this very well, up against something that does have a 90 degree. So I want it hanging off my screwdriver here. What do I got out of my pile of stuff right here that's got a nice hard 90 on it? Nothing. Let's go with the calipers then. Let's zoom in as much as we can while still being able to focus a little bit further away. Come on. Man, I can't tell. Alright, bear with me for a minute. Time to look a little ridiculous. But what we're going to do, get in here, look at this real close, see if I can compare this. Oh man, it's so close to 90. I wonder if I was seeing it with too much perspective with the camera. Darn Leatherman making a custom screw. So comparing it to the edge of the pliers here, I think it's 90, but I think that the reason I thought my pad was wrong, oh, of course, there went the screw. Fortunately, I got some extras, and I'll find that later. I think I have the head too thick on here. All right, let's see. I just need my screwdriver back. So I think this is a little bit too thick compared to the screw, and I'll have to go grab another one. And let's measure that with calipers. Measuring little tiny parts like this is just tricky to do. So I think, how much thickness do I have for the head of this? Yeah, I think it's only about 0.75, which for a part that tiny makes a big difference. And it's probably not going to be nice in order to move this because of the threads. So we're going to have to do this a little bit different than I'd like. That's annoying that they use a 90-degree screw. Alright, no, we're just going to ignore that for now. And we're going to update our piece to fit the off-the-shelf screw for the moment. Because I think I can make these a little bit thicker. The cones here, move them up a little bit. Oops, give me the cone. Not the cylinder. I can move them up by about 0.1 millimeters. It's a tiny difference, but it'll be fine. And then they actually give us a spec for this screw. So let's go back to our Torx Plus 82-degree head. And he has a 0.162 head. So let's give us a 0.17 inch hole. Close enough to 4.3 millimeters. Alright, 4.3 millimeters. Well, that'll fit the off-the-shelf screw. The countersunk angle isn't really that critical with something this tiny. It's not like this is getting torqued with a whole bunch of force. You're just going to attach it and that's it. Alright, let's go back to the rest of our design. And see what we can do to optimize some of this. So let's turn on the holster. Now it's not going to obviously fit with the pocket clip version, and this is everything turned on at once. Let's turn on the open face. If we can make it compatible with the open face, then that will be good. But it definitely will not be compatible with any of the armored versions. Alright. Let's hide everything we don't need. Second is still loading this file. Okay, don't need the armored pocket clip. We'll go ahead and work around the open face with side options. It's been the most popular variant that people have been ordering anyways. And let's hide all of the belt clip pieces we don't need. And the 16-bit backs we don't need. Alright, so ideally we want to make it compatible with the open face holster. So the issue is this little finger that I have there that grabs the edge of your part so that or edge of the arc so that the arc doesn't fall out the front is going to get in the way. So either we move this whole thing and then maybe rework the way it looks. We move the whole thing towards the center such that it's maybe flush with the scale. And that provides a little bit of tolerance on that side, but then of course you got a little bit of silver peeking out. The other option is I just literally cut away that chunk, but then this cutout gets really thin, probably too thin in this section. That's a little trickier to do. Actually, you know what I could do? Alright, I think I know what I can do. We might be able to cut out that chunk, but in a way that works with the rest of this. Hit the wrong button there. Which way do I want to cut? I want to cut from this face, I think. So we want to have that shape plus some tolerance, at least 0.5 millimeter. Let's just cut it away and see what we end up with. And it might be... Oops, wrong side. That's obviously going to look like crap, isn't it? Leaving the tweezers or whatever. Oh, maybe not. I mean, that makes it compatible, but it also leaves the tweezers kind of hanging there. They shouldn't tilt out or anything. They're long enough, and the channel's a tight enough fit. It might not be so bad with the toothpick, but then the toothpick doesn't have the detents, so you'd have to basically dock the toothpick always in the middle so that the detents work. And the toothpick doesn't need the detents because it's got the spring arms. or I move it all entirely to here, which might be what we do, and then change the shape so we can hold the pin in the remaining space. And then I'll work on how we make it look nice with rounding, or maybe we do a double chamfer or something like that in order to get that to fit. Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to work on that later. It is 4 o'clock. I've been streaming for a couple... how long have I been streaming for here? At least an hour and a half. And then also, I'm smelling that dinner's ready. So, thanks to everybody who was on. If you got any last second questions, go ahead and put them in now while I save some files. And then I'll stick around for a minute, can show off any of the... So for those who came in late, I have a second arc. Let me zoom out here again. Zoom, wrong way. And this weekend, the comb should be available. I think I'm going to tweak it a hair, no pun intended, where there's a little bit more material along, like at an angle here, because I've noticed that when I push it out, I end up bending it down while I'm still pushing it out, and I don't want that to fatigue. So that'll be a little bit of a tweak, but it'll be available this weekend. The thinner T-shank holder did work out. I just got to add a little bit of material, which I've already updated the CAD model. I just got to get those uploaded and make those available. And the new scalpel holder, which I moved over here so I didn't accidentally cut myself while I was looking at the camera and trying to hold something. And the new scalpel holder works out well. And I think that's somebody telling me that food is ready.